Hello people, once again, time for another video. Excuse the terrible audio, it's just the nature of the place I'm in. Currently sitting in a graveyard, because at what other point would I be able to find solace and peace? Well, there are better places to be honest, but, well, surrounded by those older and wiser than myself is a humbling experience, and it's also a good reminder of where we'll all end up one day. Regardless, what am I here to talk about today? Will. Well, let's start out simply. Free will is not real. You do not have a free will. What does that mean? Well, it means that your decisions have two sources, none of which are actually quote-unquote determined by yourself. The first source is, of course, your genes, that which has come to be within your body by, essentially, circumstance. You didn't choose who you are, and you will not be able to really choose that anytime soon anyways. Maybe technology will change that, but alas, that's not what we're here to talk about necessarily. The second is the environment, and the environment is, of course, the people around you, the literal environment, as in the plants and trees and the temperature and all that, and it's also basically just random happenstance in a lot of circumstances. Now, these two things, of course, aren't mutually exclusive. Your genes are influenced by your environment, and, in turn, your genes will express themselves in relation to the environment. They will react to the environment and probably change it in ways that they would want, so to speak. But no, anything here, of course, implies choice. You have no choice in any of this. That's why you don't have free will. Now you might say, it's like, oh, well, you can't perfectly predict what I'm gonna do. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm claiming that lack of free will would be. I'm not claiming that we're automatons that, like, operate completely predictably. The reason for that is not because, there's a free will and you can, like, make choices that were completely out of nowhere. No, it's because we can't control for circumstance perfectly, and we don't have perfect understanding of genes. We don't have perfect understanding of anything. None of that means that somehow there's this chance of, like, you being free and, like, making choices that have nothing to do with the environment or genes. It's like, nope, none of that would necessarily imply that. Like, people want to imply that, like, quantum physics says it's random actually means we do have free will. It's like, well, chance isn't free either, is it? Just, like, rolling a die and getting an outcome is not a choice. That's chance. And so, yeah, no. And here's the thing. The best part of this is, like, you wouldn't want free will to be real anyways, because free will, terrible. Imagine just one day, like, you have your best friend suddenly decides to try to murder you. That would be what would happen in a world in which free will existed. That is what would happen. Often, in fact. Random people would also, like, try to kill you. Also, random people will start, like, doing inappropriate things to children, or fucking, like, stop following traffic rules for no reason. That's a world with free will, essentially. If the world is truly so set up that you can just you can just start ignoring anything and everything. No circumstance, no genes, nothing. Just doing random things. Your life would be chaos. You would not love that. You would hate that, in all likelihood. As you should, by the way. It's obviously reasonable that you wouldn't want to live in a world like that. But regardless, yes. So not only is free will not real, it's also good that it's not real. Now, another very silly objection would be like, well, I feel like I have free will. I feel free. Well, okay, cool. Except that's literally a delusion. That's a literal delusion created by your brain. There's a part of your brain that's responsible for giving you a sense of agency in your life. You can turn that off. That thing can not function, and you will not have that feeling anymore. Whoa, crazy, I know. I feel that sometimes. I genuinely do when I wake up some days. You just go on like autopilot and you don't feel a sense of agency at all. And that's actually more true than your everyday normal experience when you feel like you have free will. That is actually it's an unfiltered experience of what it actually is to be alive. Now, am I saying this to like, oh, it's all over, you have no free will, we're all doomed? Of course not. Of course not. That is actually a good thing. It is a good thing that you don't have free will, because that means you can actually affect your own will in accordance with your will. That means you can also end up in bad circumstances because you don't take control of your own will. Not because it's free, but because you didn't choose by predestination, by random happenstance, and then in circumstance that ended up making you decide things to take control of yourself. Because while free will isn't real, it does not change the fact that you still have some kind of agency. It's not agency in the sense that you have the ability to choose otherwise, really. But it is agency in the sense that when you have finally encountered the circumstances that lead to you making a different decision, that is indeed your incentive to do so. And you can do that more by learning, by studying, by practicing methods to make your will stronger. Again, this is not free. It's not free. It's still not free will, but it is still increasing your agency in the world. It is increasing the amount to which you can affect your circumstance, because you can train using methods to do that. You can learn about yourself. And that is a bloody brilliant thing. I think that's really fantastic. Okay, same day, different time, different place. Out on a walk, yes. So, what are important techniques to understand yourself, to know yourself, as the Greeks would have talked about, so that you may actually increase your agency? Well, the paradox in here is actually the best way to increase your agency is to figure out precisely how limited it is. So what are some good things? How do you figure out who you are? Let's start with one that modern science would really likes, of course. Genes, DNA tests. They're good. They're really nice. They actually tell you a lot about yourself. Not just like, oh, I figured out I'm like 2% African. That's so cool. I mean, well, that's also important, but for real, the important part is actually figuring out the the predispositions you have psychologically, intellectually, in terms of tastes, in terms of body stature, in terms of ability to grow muscle. A lot of that stuff is completely or very strongly genetic. Personality, probably at least 50% genetic. IQ, at least 80% genetic. Your ability to grow muscle, strongly genetic. Your your body odor, I know that one pretty fucking well. Genetic. Yeah, but stuff like that. Knowing stuff like that is immensely useful, because of like, you can already figure out like where you're fucking doomed. Like, this is not gonna happen. Anyhow, yes. So yes, you do a DNA test. That's pretty good. And sure, in most cases, I'd recommend you do multiple tests. Not of DNA though. I think that might be excessive. There are different services that will analyze your DNA. That might be useful, but like the test itself, you should probably only do once. You should probably only send in your DNA test once, not more than that. Just saying, probably a better idea. Not to overspend on a single thing like that. Regardless, although actually, to be honest, if you have the money to spare, I'm not going to stop you. Not that I can. So yeah, start with DNA. Very good to know. As I mentioned though, some more specific things, good to know. IQ, probably one of the most important things. Basically, you can imagine it as your level cap. You can't really affect your IQ that much. As I said, it's about 80% genetic. So most of your IQ is set in stone from the day of your birth. Or not even the day of your conception, really. After that, you have no say. You can't change it. Well, okay, you can. You can make it worse, mostly. But increasing your IQ score, you can do it temporarily, but in the long term, no. It's really not not very good. Not really good prospects on that. But that is not something you should necessarily just doom over. It isn't the entire world. You can succeed with a lower IQ. You can fail with a higher IQ. This is talking averages, by the way. And generally, you should think about averages in your specific context. Sure, you might be like 80 IQ, but if you live in like sub-Saharan Africa, that's actually average, so it's not actually that big of a deal if you live in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, there are other things you could like consider, whatever, such as, personality tests. They're useful. I was going to bring up voltology. Yes, I love voltology. It's not that mainstream, but it is basically just MBTI, but better. Mostly I like it because it's pretty fucking strict about what constitutes a specific personality type. It isn't just a self-assessment where you do a survey and you just answer questions and you usually end up with pretty middling scores across the board. It's a test where you pretty solidly end up on one side of at a specific type rather than any other. Not that it is it's perfectly clear. Some people can end up somewhere in between. I think I'm slightly in between two personalities, but regardless, not that important. The problem with voltology is this: if you want to have it done by a professional, it costs money, and there's not really a personality survey you can do. Sad, but it is the case. And it's not likely to align with your MBTI. And basically that's because the MBTI is, again, it's a lot to do with self-conception, and that's not necessarily that trustworthy. The voltology does not lie. It does not do that. You can't really fake a voltology. I mean, you can do that, but you can't really do it. You can't really make observations of voltology and fake that. In a natural environment, you will have a specific voltology, and you're not going to consciously exude that voltology because you would never think to do that. You wouldn't know to do that. You can't really fake it. And that's why it's useful. And that's why I recommend it. But not to fret, I do recommend the MBTI to some degree, though I will say, as I said, it's kind of a persona. It's kind of your self-conception about yourself. It is kind of a performative thing, and I have similar, but not necessarily as harsh judgments about the Big Five. The Big Five is actually better than, MBTI from like a scientific reliability standpoint, I would not be so sure of it, though, because the difference between them is lesser than a lot of people would make it out to be. But basically, the difference is essentially just adding a neuroticism score to the MBTI, and that gives you the big 5. Whoop-de-fucking-do. So, now what to do with all this knowledge? That's the important question. Well, now that you know your predispositions, your biases, your capacity, it's time to start figuring out what you can actually do. Because once you've done that, you kind of know yourself in a way that you didn't before. And knowing yourself is a great way to start achieving things, both internally and externally. But some other recommendations. I mentioned in the first segment that since free will is not real, and you're shaped essentially by your genetics, which I mentioned you should have tested already, and the environment, and you can't change your genes, but you can change your environment, that is probably the best way to start. You should probably find yourself in a place where you can actually use whatever potential you have beneficially. If you have a bad habit of any kind, how do you most easily avoid the problems with that? Well, you go to a place where the problem is not really able to manifest. If you have, say, problems with smoking, go to a place where they don't have smoking. Not necessarily a common thing to find in the world, but there are places. If you have, I don't know, what's another good example? Phone addiction. You look at your phone all the time, scroll TikTok, maybe go to a place without Wi-Fi, remove your SIM card or whatever. Just remove yourself from a context in which you will have to suffer from your problems. And I'm not saying you should just run from your problems. You should find yourself a way to first be without the problem, then be in that space for long enough to basically stop missing whatever it is you have a problem with, and then when you're back, limiting that thing as much as you can, as long as you can, and make sure that there are consequences. Make sure other people are looking out for you when you're doing this. Make sure that there are mechanisms in place to make sure that you can't relapse into your old issues. Stuff like that. Maybe, okay, what about another problem? What if you're socially awkward? That's not an addiction, but I'm talking about solving your problems with your will. Well, if you're socially awkward, maybe going into a context with other people who are also socially awkward can help, because then you're not feeling excluded, because you're not surrounded by people who are not suffering that kind of social setback that other people are. And this is, as I said, this is all for one thing and one thing only, actually, at the end of the day. Will. Because, as I said, will, it might seem contradictory to find out that actually knowing more about yourself, and therefore knowing what your actual potential is, therefore limiting yourself in a sense, because you know what you are, meaning you can't be other things in essence, actually gives you the ability to change yourself into something you could be in a way which you couldn't if you just believed you could be anything, and then becoming immensely disappointed when you realize, whoa, I can't, because that's not how the world works, actually. It really isn't. It really is not. And hell, actually, important note here, don't get too attached to any of these things. It's like, oh, I'm like an NETI. Wow, crazy. I'm like now gonna become completely attached to this specific identity and ignore everything else about myself. Or think that I'm now restricted completely to these specific niches that have been set out for me. Don't think like that. That is not a way to do that. That's not a good way to live either. It is better to see these as general guidelines. They are not the road itself. They shouldn't be mistaken for the one path, the only way you can go. Because there is not necessarily certainty in that sense, but there is a general, shall we say, field of probability ahead of you, and you should generally avoid betting on very unlikely outcomes unless you've prepared yourself in the ways required to actually achieve those unlikely outcomes. And failing that, you obviously should have other plans. You should not just focus yourself on one direction and then go at that no matter the actual reality of how that's going to turn out. You'll have to be a little pragmatic about things. And hell, yeah, another very important thing, community, goddammit. Find yourself your people, whatever that happens to mean. And I don't mean an internet community. Okay, like, yeah, sure, internet communities can be useful, but like, listen to the Dreg. He knows what he's talking about. He understands human psychology. We're not lone Sigma wolves, because wolves are not like that either. They don't do that. If wolves lived on their own, they die. It's not what you should strive for. That's retarded, quite frankly, and you should find other people. Do we struggle with that? Has modernity basically ruined that? Yeah, but the tools exist. The tools do exist, and as I said, find in real life communities. Don't fucking resort to the internet. The internet is not your friend. The internet it isn't real. Your parents were right. Our parents were right. The internet is not real, and you should avoid it. Stop becoming a puppet of the digital anima, okay? Like, listen to Uncle Gabriel, okay? Chris Gabriel knows everything. I'm just kidding, but seriously, that man is he's a good guy. He's a cool guy. Seriously, listen to him sometimes, because he actually got some banger takes. Actually, I say that as if not most of his takes are banger, but whatever. Boobies.